Sweetheart, I asked if you were sleeping, Amy mumbled, uttering words that eluded my understanding. May I pose a question to you? How is it that, after nearly a quarter century together, you've recently become more proficient in the bedroom? Barely awake, Amy grumbled. I've always done it for your sake. I observed Amy, noting her state of relaxation as she lay curled up in a fetal position, embracing an additional pillow, her back turned towards me. Indeed you have, but you never appear to derive pleasure from it. What's behind this sudden transformation? Amy rolled over, still gripping the pillow tightly. She beamed at me with her captivating azure eyes and playfully retorted, Well, I didn't hear any objections from you. I returned Amy's smile, my dearest friend and the woman I've admired since our chance encounter at a casual gathering more than 2 decades ago. I'm not lodging a complaint, I'm simply curious. You see, before we tied the knot, you allowed me to experience it orally on 2 occasions, but afterwards, it ceased entirely. Yet, in the span of 1 week, you've permitted it twice more. Amy was now fully awake and inquired, What's troubling you, Chris? I replied, Amy, I'm merely posing a straightforward question. Throughout our 25-year journey, you've engaged in this act without much enthusiasm, as if it were a chore. However, tonight, you did something entirely different. I'm simply wondering about the sudden surge in enthusiasm. Amy sat up in bed, and as I continued, her curiosity grew. If you prefer, we can revert to the previous way. Amy grew angry and seemed poised to become even angrier. No, I'm genuinely enjoying your improved skills, I said, taking the opportunity to provoke her further. You're almost as skilled as some of my former college girlfriends. Amy's face reddened with anger, but before she could respond, I pressed on. Nevertheless, you still haven't disclosed the reason behind your newfound proficiency. Did you stumble upon something? Have you discussed it with your friends? Or perhaps you've had some practice. Amy was furious. Keeping my composure, I clarified, I'm not accusing you of anything. I simply desire understanding. You've harbored a dislike for performing oral sex throughout our relationship, and now it has become pleasurable. I'm curious as to why. Amy grabbed her pillow and stormed towards the door. As she exited the bedroom, she yelled angrily, You don't need to wonder anymore because I won't do it again. Amy was halfway down the hallway, heading towards our guest room, when I called out from the bedroom. I suppose I'll uncover the truth tomorrow. What do I mean? Well, the private investigator I hired nearly 6 weeks ago has completed his report. I'm meeting him in the morning. I suspect your newfound skills will feature prominently in that report. I closed and locked the bedroom door, and in that moment, I witnessed Amy's jaw drop. Her incessant knocking, crying, and pleading persisted for over an hour while I lay in our spacious bed, tears streaming onto my pillow. Amy and I typically rose early, but since I wished to avoid her, I set my alarm for 3 o'clock in the morning. Swiftly, I dressed in gym attire and departed from the house within 5 minutes. My workout that morning lasted 2 hours, leaving me utterly spent. Following a refreshing shower, I changed into clothes I had packed in my car the previous day. Shortly before 6 o'clock, I arrived at my favorite breakfast spot, a mere 2 blocks away from my office, and ordered a cup of coffee. I powered on my cell phone, instantly bombarded by a flurry of messages and voicemails from my unfaithful spouse. Ignoring them, I composed a text to my supervisor, requesting a pre-work meeting at Lucy's. About half an hour later, I received a reply from Stacy, confirming our rendezvous at 7:30. As Stacy walked into Lucy's, she scanned the surroundings before settling on the bench across from me. Upon spotting me, she ordered a to-go coffee and bagel, then directed her attention towards me. After giving me a quick once-over, Stacy exclaimed, "You look absolutely dreadful." "Indeed, I feel even worse," I replied. Sensing her concern, she inquired, "Is there something troubling you at work?" Shaking my head, I saw Stacy visibly relax as she completed her question. "No, it's personal. I suspect Amy may be unfaithful. She practically confessed last night. I've engaged a private investigator and will meet with them this morning to gather the details. I just wanted to inform you that I might be in and out of the office as I handle this matter." Stacy sat silently for a moment, gathering her thoughts. Finally, she asked, "How can I support you?" "Unless you have a miraculous solution, I'm not sure there's much I can do. I'll be taking the next couple of days off, but I'll stay in touch with the office. For now, I'll avoid Amy. I have a meeting with the private investigator today and a lawyer tomorrow. I explained with a shrug. Don't you think you're jumping the gun? Unless there's something you're not telling me, you haven't found any concrete evidence yet, Stacy suggested. I deliberately provoked a fight about intimacy last night. Amy became instantly angry and stormed out of the bedroom. I told her she didn't have to answer my questions. My private investigator will handle it in the morning. If you had witnessed the look on Amy's face, you'd be absolutely certain about what the report will reveal, I asserted. You should talk to her, Chris. I know I will, but not right now, Stacy inquired. Where will you stay? I'll book a room somewhere, I replied. Stacy rummaged through her oversized bag, eventually producing a set of keys. Handing me one of them, she said, Here's a key to our getaway cottage. You've stayed there before, and we won't be using it until the end of the month. It's only a 35-minute drive away. As she handed me the key, she offered some advice. Can I give you some advice? Of course, I replied. If things unfold as you expect, your life will worsen before it improves. It'll be tough for a while, but one day, you'll wake up and find that you're not utterly miserable anymore. It'll mark the beginning of your recovery, she shared. Sounds like you're speaking from experience, I remarked. My ex-husband divorced me 12 years ago. It was a trying time. We sipped our coffee, and Stacy continued. I don't discuss it often, mostly because I'm embarrassed. I messed up my life, my kids' lives, and Tom's life. His family despises me, and my son's friends hit on me because they know everything. I interjected. You don't have to disclose all of this to me, Stacy. Even after 2 years of weekly therapy sessions, I still find myself with more questions than answers about my foolish actions. We both shared a sad chuckle. Stacy continued, sharing the worst way in which Tom discovered my infidelity. He tested positive for an STD. I had given my husband and closest friend a disease. I was left speechless, and Stacy proceeded to say, It gets even worse, if that's possible. I panicked and blamed Tom, saying he had given me the disease. We both knew. Well, everyone knew that I was the one who cheated. Stacy stared at the table as she confessed, Why did I do it? Because I could. Because I wanted to feel attractive again. Because I desired a secret. Because I found forbidden, anonymous encounters alluring. She went on to elaborate. I travel for work, just like you do. Once or twice a year, I would meet someone intriguing and invite them to my room. Looking back, it all seems so foolish. We sat in silence until Stacy asked, Have you ever been unfaithful? No, honestly. I've never felt tempted. Don't get me wrong, I'm not perfect. I enjoy flirting and knowing that women find me attractive, but I've never considered betraying Amy. I suppose that's just who I am. The intimacy with Amy has been quite ordinary. She's not one for exploring new experiences, but even a regular night with Amy is always superior to the wildest one-night stand from my college days. Stacy inquired, What made you suspicious? I responded, Amy and I have always maintained an active sex life, even after 25 years. We're intimate 2 or 3 times a week. Lately, Amy has been more forward, more daring. I shrugged once again, explaining, After a couple of months with a growing knot in my stomach, I decided to hire a private investigator. I'll soon find out the results. I bet Amy will call the office looking for you. Stacy considered the situation and suggested, Let her know that you're taking some time off and won't be back until next week. She settled the bill, along with her bagel, and gave me a tight hug. Stay strong. If you need anything, just let me know. Our daughters, Julie and Kate, were both in their 3rd year at the University of Connecticut. Julie, who was born 9 months before Kate and skipped 4th grade, was studying electrical engineering like me, while Kate was pursuing a major in chemistry with aspirations for a medical career. Earlier, I managed to get in touch with Kate, asking her and Julie to meet me later in the day without contacting their mom until we had a chance to talk. Dad, what's going on? Mom has been calling like crazy, and she must know we're avoiding her, they asked inquisitively. I embraced Julie and planted a gentle kiss on Kate's cheek, guiding them to a quiet spot in Yukon Student Union. You don't look so good, Dad, Julie remarked, and I chuckled, realizing those were the same words my boss had said earlier. Yeah, I've heard that before, I replied. Then it was Kate's turn. Just spill it, Dad. We're concerned. What's happening? I had rehearsed what to say, but when the moment came, I couldn't find the words. Instead, The tears that I had been holding back since meeting with the private investigator burst forth. Both girls leaped out of their seats and embraced me tightly, providing comfort until I could compose myself. I hate to break this to you, but I'm going to file for divorce from Mom, I finally revealed. She's been engaged in a long-term affair with a coworker. I told them. Julie began, but her words trailed off. Yes, sweetheart, I'm sure. I have evidence, I assured her. Julie looked stunned, and Kate started to cry. Then Julie spoke up again. Dad, I need to see the proof. I know you wouldn't lie, but I need to see it. Earlier, I had selected one of the less offensive photos from the investigator's report. I showed them a picture of their mom and Mike Brooks leaving a house that their real estate firm was selling. They were kissing on the front porch. As they looked at the picture together, Julie began, Dad, sweetheart. I interrupted. I have photos, videos, texts, and emails. I won't show you any of it, but I've seen them. They're terrible. Both girls were now in tears. Are you really going to divorce Mom? Kate asked through her sobs. At this point, I don't see any other choice, I replied. I know I haven't been a perfect husband or father, I admitted, waving off their objections. But I've always tried to do right by you. Sometimes I messed up, but never on purpose. I've given my all to this family. I don't have anything left to give, and it seems like Mom wants more. The girls listened intently as I spoke. I still love your mom, though not as much as I did 6 weeks ago when I first grew suspicious. But I don't like her much anymore. I can't trust her, and I can't imagine ever trusting her again. And the worst part is, she has lost respect for me. She has been belittling and humiliating me in the worst ways, and she doesn't care. There was a brief silence, broken by Julie's ringing phone. We saw Mom's name on the screen. Don't answer that, I told Julie. Before I could say more, Julie grabbed her phone and answered it angrily. Sorry, Mom, but we're too busy consoling Dad, who's heartbroken. If you need someone to talk to, call up your affair partner. Amy's hysterical shouts were audible as Julie ended the call. When the phone rang again immediately, Julie turned it off, and Kate did the same. I'm sorry you're stuck in the middle of this mess. Your mom? Well, she's still your mom. She loves you, and you know it. Things might be tense between you and Mom for a while, but you still need to treat her with respect, I explained as the girls started to object. I raised my hand to silence them. I'm not asking you to forgive her for what she's done or the damage she's caused, but we all have to find a way to move forward. I looked at both of them and added, she's your mom, flaws and all, just like you have to accept me after leaving the Yukon campus. I made a stop at a burger place to grab some food and a refreshing craft beer. Then I proceeded to my parents' house, a place I rarely visited without prior notice. As I sat in the driveway, taking a moment to gather my thoughts, I noticed my parents' front door opening. My dad emerged onto the front stoop, followed by my mom. They observed me from a distance while I remained seated in my car. Summoning my courage, I stepped out of the vehicle and began walking towards them. Dad and I met halfway, and he embraced me tightly, squeezing me in a bear hug. All the strength I had mustered dissipated, and I found myself crying unabashedly on my dad's shoulder. With concern in their eyes, my parents acknowledged the frantic calls from Amy, indicating that something was amiss. They had anticipated my arrival later that night. After I divulged Amy's affair with her coworker, Mom inquired if counseling could assist me in coping with the situation. She's always optimistic and views Amy almost as her own daughter. Tears welled up in her eyes as I shook my head and responded, I don't wish to see a therapist. I've treated Amy and our daughters with utmost care. I haven't done anything wrong, and I don't deserve the cruelty Amy has shown me. However, you're right, Mom. We've shared many wonderful years together. Pausing for a moment, I admitted, until Amy, and Amy alone, shattered it all. This isn't a one-time lapse. It's a full-blown affair between two selfish married individuals who only prioritize themselves. Mom appeared to be searching for an alternative solution. I believe I surprised her when I questioned, why would you want me to live in misery with a deceitful and unfaithful person? I'm not flawless, but don't I deserve better? Dad interjected and urged me to be more considerate towards Mom, reminding me that they were still grappling with the shock of the situation. He assured me of their support for whatever decision I made. After a brief pause, he added, furthermore, if possible, we'd like to maintain a relationship with Amy and her family. It might not be as strong as before, but I hope Amy's actions haven't irreparably damaged that possibility. As Dad finished speaking, Mom's phone rang. Glancing at the screen, she exclaimed, "It's Amy." After a moment's hesitation, she locked eyes with me and stated, "I won't ignore Amy's calls, and I won't deceive her." "I'll never ask you to do that, Dad." We remained quiet as Mom picked up the phone. "Hello, Amy. He got here about 10 minutes ago and told us about your actions. I think he'll be staying here tonight." "Amy? Amy, I'm sorry, Chris." "Amy's coming over," Mom said. "Don't worry about it, Mom. I'm going to head out. I'll give you a call tomorrow." Mom asked, "Where are you going?" "Stacy has a cottage at Cooper Lake. She's letting me stay there for now." Dad pointed out, "You'll have to talk to her eventually." "I will, but I'll do it when I'm ready, not when she wants. I'm just not prepared yet." "What should we say to Amy when she shows up?" Mom inquired. "I'd call her and let her know it's pointless to come over. Tell her I'm not ready to talk. I trust you won't lie, but I hope you won't tell her where I'm staying." Mom started crying. I walked over and hugged her tightly. Dad joined in, and the Arrington family comforted each other. After officially initiating the divorce process with a visit to a highly recommended divorce lawyer, I went to my in-laws' house. Amy's car wasn't there, so I parked and approached the front door. "It's really bad, isn't it?" Those were Frank Wilson's first words as he opened the front door. "It's about as bad as it gets." Frank stood in the doorway blocking my way and asked, "Who cheated?" "She did." Frank inquired, "Do you have proof?" I nodded, and Frank exclaimed, "Dang." Then he turned and headed to the kitchen, leaving the door ajar. Eileen, Amy's mom, was nervously sitting at the kitchen table. She looked up as I entered and gestured toward the coffee maker, saying, "Fresh coffee's there." As I silently poured myself a cup, Frank retrieved a bottle of Jack from a cabinet. We both sat down, and Frank poured a generous amount of bourbon into his coffee, sliding the bottle my way. As I added some liquid courage to my cup, Frank asked, "Can I see the evidence?" Looking down at the table, I replied, "I can show you the written report, but I won't share the photos or videos." When he cursed again and met his eyes, I continued, "But Frank, I'm begging you, please don't ask to see the photos. No father should ever have to see his daughter in those situations." It was painful to witness, but Frank visibly deflated in front of Eileen and me. Eileen interjected, "Is there any chance your marriage can be saved?" "I met with a lawyer this morning. He'll have the paperwork ready by early next week, and we'll file it with the court on Wednesday. The lawyer will contact Amy using her cell number. She can choose to pick up the paperwork at his office, or we can serve her officially." "I can't believe you're giving up on your marriage so easily." Eileen burst out angrily. "I'm not giving up, Eileen. Amy made that decision when she chose to cheat on me." "But it happened more than once," I replied. Eileen yelled, "It was just once." I took 3 deep breaths to calm down and briefly regretted adding bourbon to my coffee. "It wasn't just once, Eileen. Only Amy and her affair partner know how many times they've met, but it's been going on for months." We sat in silence for a moment before I continued. "This is your second marriage, just like mine. Both of your first marriages ended because of infidelity." Frank quickly interjected, "But those marriages were new. You've been married for 25 years. Doesn't that count for something?" "Love, trust, and respect." "Frank, you've said those words to me countless times. A marriage needs all 3. I have doubts about Amy's trustworthiness, and she lacks respect for me." Eileen asked, "Will you treat Amy fairly during the divorce?" I replied, "I must adhere to the laws governing divorce, but I won't unnecessarily make it harder for Amy or our family." "What about the girls?" Frank inquired. "I spoke to them yesterday on campus. They are aware of the divorce and the reasons behind it. Like everyone else, they're upset with Amy. It may take time, but they will come to understand, I promise." Eileen tearfully pleaded, "Please, talk to Amy." I assured her, "I will, I promise. However, not today, and probably not for a few days. But I will talk to her." Mary Beth Johnston has been friends with Amy for a long time. They could have been closer, but I've always been cautious of Mary Beth and her husband, Phil, since we first met. Mary Beth and Phil have an open marriage. While they didn't actively recruit others into their lifestyle, They were not secretive about it either. Over the years, they often shared stories about their activities. Amy's interest in swapping parties and casual relationships made me uncomfortable, but I had complete trust in my wife. Mary Beth started the conversation at Dunkin' Donuts, saying, "I can't believe how you're treating Amy. Yes, she messed up big time, but she's sorry. You need to move on and stop acting foolish. If you want to mess around, go ahead, but don't do anything reckless." I calmly responded, "I won't do anything reckless, I promise." Mary Beth looked skeptical and said, "Amy thinks you're planning to get a divorce." I confirmed, "I am getting a divorce. Papers will be filed on Wednesday." It's not foolish, it's what people do when they want to leave a cheating spouse. Before Mary Beth could say more, I asked, "You've known me almost as long as Amy has. I've known about your open marriage the whole time. Have I ever given any indication that I'd be okay with infidelity?" Mary Beth was shocked and muttered, "This is a nightmare." I replied, "It's a nightmare for Amy, me, our kids, and everyone else." "Mary Beth, it's about to become your nightmare too." Angrily, Mary Beth snapped, "Of course, it's a nightmare for Phil and me. We've been friends for years." I smirked at Mary Beth, knowing my warning went right over her head. "What?" she asked, followed by an agitated, "What?" I disclosed. I hired a private investigator to look into Amy's suspicious behavior. Staying assertive, I continued, "The investigator's report includes all the text messages between you and Amy over the past 6 months." Mary Beth tried to process this information, and that's when I dropped the bomb. "I know Mike was part of your swapping group before you got married. You even told Amy he has a Big Johnson. When you found out he was working with Amy, you pushed her to go for it. Amy has kept you updated on their dates. I know every detail, you witch." Before Mary Beth could speak, I interjected, "Every action has consequences. Amy's cheating leads to a divorce. Your consequences won't be as severe, but I'll make sure to disrupt your lives." With a smile, Mary Beth demanded, "How will you do that?" "I'm glad you asked." I took out a folded paper from my back pocket, unfolded it, and said, "I'm planning to send this email to a few individuals whom you and Phil know. The subject of the email will be Mary Beth and Phil Johnston, destroyers of my marriage. My name is Chris Harrington, and I have been married to Amy for almost 25 years. While our marriage appeared to be perfect to me, except for the last few months, it has crumbled due to the direct impact of Mary Beth and Phil Johnston's open marriage. My wife has cheated on me, and I am filing for divorce. It's disheartening to see 25 years of marriage go down the drain. I am sending this email as a cautionary tale to prevent other marriages from being ruined by Mary Beth and Phil's nonchalant attitude towards faithfulness. My wife had an affair with one of Phil and Mary Beth's swapping friends. Mary Beth actually encouraged the affair and assured my wife, Amy, that she would never forget it. Mary Beth was right. My wife will never forget this affair, as it has completely destroyed our marriage and family. Whether you have a personal, professional, or social connection with the Johnstons, be aware of their complete disregard for marriage vows and their readiness to wreck your own marriage. Perhaps if I had been more cautious in choosing our friends, Amy and I wouldn't be on the path to divorce. Best regards, Chris Harrington." Mary Beth threatened, "We'll sue you if you send this to anyone." I chuckled and replied, "My lawyer reviewed the email and the private investigator's reports and confirmed that everything in the email is true. So, who would you like me to send it to? I have email addresses for all the teachers and administrators in your school district, as well as 38 individuals at Phil's company. There are over 300 people there, so the email will likely spread. Members of your country club and church will also come across it, along with some of the groups you and Phil are involved in." Mary Beth sat there stunned. I handed her a copy of the email and said, "You can show Phil exactly what's being sent out. Have a great life, you awful person." As part of the private investigator's report, I discovered that Lucy Brooks, who is married to the unpleasant Michael Brooks, takes her kids to Willowbrook Park every Saturday. At the park, she and her kids socialize with a regular group of moms and children. When I arrived, Lucy greeted me, saying, "Chris, I haven't seen you since the company holiday party. What brings you here?" I replied, "I just wanted to catch up." 7 moms were observing us closely. I explained that this wasn't just a chance encounter and asked if we could have a private conversation. Lucy eagerly agreed, saying, "Sure, absolutely." However, her excitement quickly faded when she realized that I wasn't sharing her cheerful mood. Concerned for Lucy, Her friends noticed the change in her demeanor and either looked worried for her or upset with me for causing her distress. The plump blonde beside her asked, "Are you okay?" Lucy didn't respond immediately, only snapping out of her trance when another mom demanded, "What's happening?" "I'm okay, really," Lucy finally replied. Then she turned to me and said, "I think we should talk privately." "That would be best." A slim, attractive redhead stood up, shooting angry glances between Lucy and me. "Chris, this is my protective cousin, Aggie. Aggie, meet Chris Harrington. He's married to someone who works with Mike. I think he wants to discuss the women's intuition stuff you believe I've been imagining." Aggie nodded and said, "How about Lucy and I head to the picnic table under the tree?" I gestured to a nearby spot. "We'll have some privacy there, but we'll still be close by." Lucy stared at the ground for a moment, tears silently streaming down her face before she rose to her feet. Aggie rushed to her side, embracing her tightly as they both cried. When they pulled apart, Aggie's anger had softened into sadness as she saw my own tears. "I told Aggie that I'm not just delivering bad news," I said. "I'm caught in the middle of this mess with your cousin." Walking alongside Lucy, she halted after a few steps and turned to Aggie, saying, "Can you take the kids home with you?" Aggie replied, "Sure thing, Lucy. And if necessary, can they stay over for the weekend?" Aggie gave a sad smile and nodded. Seated across from each other at the picnic table, I asked, "How long have you been aware of this?" Lucy sighed and replied, "Unfortunately, this isn't new territory for me. We got married a bit later than most, and soon after, we started a family. After our second child, Mike got a vasectomy. His first affair cropped up within 6 months, and the second followed a year after our first confrontation. Now, this is the third strike. I've had a hunch something was off for about a month. I'm wrestling with the decision to divorce Amy. I know it's inevitable, but I keep doubting myself. Can you shed some light on why you stayed with Mike after his first 2 affairs?" "It was mostly for the kids. Well, entirely for them, really," Lucy explained. "I grew up with divorced parents, a bitter mom, and a dad I saw once a week. I didn't want that for my own kids. I still don't, but it seems like that's where we're headed. Fortunately, I have a strong support network nearby, so I'll have plenty of help." I had a feeling Lucy would respond that way, so I nodded in agreement and asked, "Can you tell me why Mike cheats?" I asked Lucy about her suspicions, and she nodded in response. "He enjoys the thrill of corrupting innocent women," I explained. "I was quite naive about intimacy, and Mike became my lover and guide. He established rules for me to follow and rewarded me when I complied. I enjoyed being his adventurous partner, but true fulfillment lies in a loving and faithful marriage." "Curious," Lucy asked, "do you have any evidence?" I handed her a thick envelope. "I suggest giving this to your lawyer and avoiding looking at it. Most of Mike and Amy's conversations are hurtful. There's nothing there except pain." Lucy inquired, "What made you suspicious of Amy?" I chuckled and replied, "It seems Mike had similar expectations for Amy. She obediently learned his tricks and shared them with me. While we've been talking, I've decided to stay at Aggie's place for the weekend. I know it's a big request, but could you drive me home so I can pack for a few days?" Lucy asked. Before I could respond, she warned, "Mike will be there. I'm not worried about your troublesome husband." "I'm happy to take you home," I assured her. After finalizing everything with Aggie, Lucy returned to me, and we headed to my car. The drive to her house was mostly quiet. When we reached her street, she pointed to an SUV parked on the side and instructed me to stop there. Following her guidance, I parked next to the truck and watched as Lucy signaled to the driver. She then gestured ahead and indicated that her house was the white colonial 5 houses down on the left. As I pulled into the driveway, the SUV followed behind me. Mike was in the front yard, mowing the lawn. Things unfolded rapidly. Mike waved to Lucy as she got out of my car, and 2 women swiftly exited the SUV, flanking Lucy and guiding her to the front door. A burly man trailed behind the women, standing guard by the entrance. After they went inside, an older man emerged from the SUV, coinciding with my stepping out of my car. He approached me and offered a handshake, introducing himself as Larry Green. "Lucy is my daughter," he said. Leaning against the front of my car, hands on the hood, I observed as Mike approached. "Chris Harrington, what's Lucy doing with you?" he asked, his face pale and shaken. Before Mike could say anything further, Larry interjected. You're scum, Mike. You've just lost the only good part of your sorry life. This is all garbage. Mike yelled, then rushed towards the front door, shouting, Stay out of my way, Georgie! I noticed that Georgie, the large man sitting on the steps, didn't move until Mike attempted to pass. Then, with swift action, Georgie stood up, pushed Mike back, and sent him tumbling to the ground. Larry looked at me questioningly, and I remarked, It looked like Mike slipped. Larry nodded and replied, Yep, sure did. Struggling to get up, Mike eventually turned to me and shouted, It's all your wife's fault! She came after me. Everyone knows she's just a public property. I chuckled sadly, trying to conceal my emotions. Just then, Larry put his hand on my shoulder, giving me a reassuring boost. You and Mike are a perfect match made in hell. You both know each other's game. How do you think that'll play out? I don't want anything to do with her, Mike spat. I retorted, Well, lucky for her then. She's got enough problems without dealing with a jerk like you. I shook hands with Larry and said, This guy isn't worth my time. I'm out. Take care of Lucy. She's a remarkable woman. 2 weeks had passed since Amy got served, and her lawyer was in discussions with mine. Life felt like a dreary routine. During lunch, I checked my voicemail and heard a message from my mother-in-law, Eileen. Hey, Chris, it's Eileen. Just reminding you about the promise you made to talk with Amy. It'd mean a lot if you could give her a call. Thanks, love you. Grinding my teeth, I reluctantly dialed my home number, knowing Amy was at work. I left a message saying, Amy, it's Chris. I'm staying at Stacy's family lake house. If you're up for it, swing by on Saturday for lunch. I'll make sandwiches. Meet me at the backyard picnic table at noon on Saturday. Thanks for coming. Out here, Chris? Amy said, expressing gratitude as she sat across from me at the picnic table by the lake. Even without her usual radiance, Amy still looked good after all these years. It's nice to see you, Amy. I appreciate you making the drive, I replied. Amy glanced around and commented, It's so peaceful here. I agree. Initially, I was considering moving into a downtown condo near the office, but lately, I've been eyeing lakefront properties around here, I shared. My unintended comment hit Amy hard, and I could see the devastation in her eyes immediately. Amy, I began, but she cut me off with a wave of her hand. Tears welled up as she said, No need to apologize. I'm probably just being too sensitive, Amy said, averting her gaze from the table. I'm so afraid. Her words lingered in the air, heavy with emotion, as she gathered herself. I've been scared before, many times. Work challenges, raising our amazing daughters, they've all terrified me. But I always had you by my side. We were a team, and I knew that together we could overcome anything, she reflected, smiling softly. I agree. We did a good job, didn't we? We shared a peaceful moment, enjoying our lunch. I topped off Amy's wine glass and poured myself another beer. I've started seeing a therapist, Amy sighed. Well, it's not fair to just call her a shrink. Drive. Popper has been great, helping me navigate the end of our marriage and find my way forward on my own. I'm glad to hear that, Amy. I hope it helps you find the closure you need, I replied. I've told myself over and over not to ask you about reconciliation. Everyone says it's not possible. But I have to ask, is there any chance you can forgive me and we can try again? Amy's voice trembled with hope. Taking a deep breath, I downed a swig of beer. That's two separate questions, Amy. I've been grappling with the forgiveness part since we agreed to meet today. I've made a commitment to myself to give it a try, I admitted after some thought. It's going to be a process, and I'm not sure if it's achievable, but I'm willing to give it a shot. But let me be clear, if I do forgive you, it's not primarily for your sake, but for the girls, our family, and myself. Finishing off the rest of my beer, I added, we'll still be involved in each other's lives enough that I don't want to carry around any bitterness. But Amy, the divorce will proceed and we won't be getting back together. Amy cried and nodded, understanding my words. She asked, Can I reach out if I need support? If I need someone to talk to? Though I wanted to shout, I kept calm. I grabbed another beer from the cooler and filled my glass. Once I composed myself, I proposed, How about a compromise? Until the divorce is final, let's handle things through our lawyers. Afterward, I'll be open to your calls, except for emergencies. 7 months later, our divorce was finalized. It was my first night in my new lakeside home, and I sat on the back deck contemplating whether to crack open a couple of high-alcohol craft beers from the cooler or dive straight into the bourbon on the table before me when my phone buzzed. Seeing Amy's name, I answered with a smile. "Hey, Amy. I'm feeling really down and could use someone to talk to," she said, her voice filled with sadness. 5 years later, things were looking up. I couldn't help but notice that the sky appeared clearer and the birds sounded livelier. Life was getting better. Stacy's prediction had come true. She transferred to our company's main office in Dallas and now holds the position of Executive VP of Sales and Marketing. Despite remaining single, she has witnessed her children grow up. Over a glass or two of wine, she admits to occasionally enjoying the thrill of a one-night stand. Julie graduated from college with top honors and currently works as an engineer for a defense contractor on the West Coast. She is in a somewhat serious relationship and is pursuing her master's degree part-time. Julie maintains a strong bond with both Amy and me. We affectionately refer to her as the mole due to her limited social life. After college, she worked for a pharmaceutical company for a couple of years before enrolling in Johns Hopkins Medical School. She is engaged to another medical student, and they are both dedicated to their studies. While I reach out to Kate on a weekly basis, she seldom initiates contact, preferring to focus on her studies. Surprisingly, my parents are in good health for their age. They still reside in Hartford, Connecticut, but escape the harsh winters by spending time in a small condo in Clearwater, Florida. While my mom enjoys monthly lunches with Amy, my dad rarely joins. Frank and Eileen are also doing well, despite minor health concerns. They take turns hosting weekly dinners with my parents, maintaining close ties. Mary Beth and Phil relocated to the Midwest a year after our divorce, with Mike following 6 months later. Good riddance to them all. Lucy and her children are thriving. Though it took her some time to start dating again, she has become quite popular among eligible suitors, setting high standards. Eventually, she found Mr. Right, and they recently celebrated their first anniversary. Judging by their constant smiles, they still feel like newlyweds. Amy seems content as well. While her relationship with Kate remains strained, her other connections have healed. She has been seeing a man for 6 months, and the last time we spoke, she mentioned that he might be the one. I am hopeful for her happiness. As for me, things are going smoothly. I stepped into Stacy's role as division president after she moved to Dallas. My responsibilities are manageable and on track. 2 years after the divorce, I bumped into an old acquaintance, Lucy's cousin Aggie, at a mutual friend's daughter's graduation party. We chatted for a bit, and later, as the older crowd left, Aggie pulled me aside. During lunchtime, like most days, Aggie showed up at my office and locked the door behind her. I finished my phone conversation promptly and joined her on the sofa. Being in my early 50s, I must admit that my abilities are not what they once were. While I may have been more vigorous in the past, now I can only provide a modest amount of enthusiasm. Sadly, the days of intense passion are behind me. Fortunately, Aggie doesn't appear to be bothered by this.